Alright, welcome back to Happy Hour Films, the channel where me and Ross are currently making each other watch different shows, movies, whatever, without any regard for the other's sanity. So, this week, Ross is turning the tables on me. I have gone on a quest to find an anime Ross will genuinely love. Well, this week, Ross is making me watch anime, which I found very surprising, kind of, because he was talking about it, but he's making me watch Bastard, heavy metal dark fantasy. Now, I figured this was Ross is a metalhead, so the author of this and a lot of the elements in this are named after famous metal bands. You hear, like, countries are named after Metallica. There's spells named after Megadeth, Guns N' Roses. Steel Panther, I think, comes up. But, so, yes, Ross had me watch Bastard, which the first 13 episodes, I think the show is still releasing, but 13 episodes are up on Netflix. I watched all 13, and Ross gave me 10 questions on anime in general in relation to Bastard, heavy metal dark fantasy. First, I'm going to go into my general review of the show, and then I will get to Ross's questions. So, the show itself, it's fine. Like, it's not amazing by any means. The action's good enough. The story, I can't really judge it off the first 13 episodes because it's a much longer running manga, and I've never read the whole manga. So, this is kind of like, if you are an anime fan, judging what I'm judging this show off of would be like judging Hunter x Hunter off of just the Hunter exam arc. So it wouldn't totally be fair to give a complete reflection of this show. But what I've seen so far, I wasn't hugely impressed. The writing is very clunky. I do like the characters. The characters are entertaining enough for me to continue watching, and I would consider continuing to watch. But there are elements of the show that I don't like, where something like Hunter x Hunter, after watching the Hunter exam, I was very intrigued about the world and wanted to continue watching. This definitely did not pull me in as like an anime like that, but Hunter x Hunter is one of the best anime of all time, in my opinion, so to be understood. Now, the music is kick-ass. The music is awesome in this show, and the animation is very good too. Again, my biggest problem with the show is the writing. Like, the dialogue is so clunky, and it's very, it's weird, because you don't see that many true fantasy anime anymore. It's, like, this is true fantasy in the sense, like, it could almost be a D&D campaign or, like, a traditional fantasy novel. Like, you have wizards, you have knights, you have ninjas, you have, like, it feels like a true fantasy. And unfortunately, that makes the dialogue almost sound like a video game or one of those adventures where every time something happens, someone's explaining it. Now, that's a pretty common trope in longer running anime who have complex power systems. The only thing is the explanations go nowhere with the powers in this show. It's not like, again, I'm going to go back to Hunter x Hunter. When explaining Nen in Hunter x Hunter, there are several episodes that exposition out what Nen is, how someone develops it, how a power comes about, what powers are good against other powers, what powers aren't good with other powers. It's like 2 or 3 episodes where they're explaining Nen in general, and they get right to the point. The magic system is never, like, you can see he's trying to explain it, but it just never really hits its mark. Also, story-wise, it's funny, when I was watching the show, I found it remarkably like Rurouni Kenshin in the base premise of the story. Not in quality, because Rurouni Kenshin blows this out of the water, and it does these tropes better. But Our main character is a legendary warrior who disappeared some odd 10 years ago, has a cool nickname, comes back, and is nicer than people thought he would be. Then you have the main girl, who really inspires him to hit his true powers, and she's the one that he really wants to protect. So yeah, that's obviously you have Dark Schneider as Kenshin in this. Then there's the main girl who is. It's Yoko is the main girl. Then you have the guy who tried to kill the main character early, only to join the main character and become good friends with him. So that would be Gara, Ninja Master in this. For Rurouni Kenshin, that's it's Yonosuke. I believe it's Yonosuke who fights Kenshin early and wants a rematch, essentially. And the general story is people from the main character's past, when the person was a killer badass, want him to go back to being a killer badass. So it takes a lot of the same tropes. Now, I'm not entirely sure when this manga was written, so I'm not sure if Kenshin, I know Kenshin is a pretty early manga, relatively, because the anime would have been the late 90s, early 2000s. So I'm not entirely sure on that. The characters are entertaining. Dark Schneider is pretty cool. The fight scenes, the animation it was all entertaining enough to keep me around. Now, I don't want to go too much more into my review because Ross has some questions and my review might answer some of those questions. So, question number 1, is all anime this horny? Now, when I'm watching this, so Ross preemptively said, like, dude, this anime is super horny. Like, it's really, really bad with that. I'm like, okay, let's go into this, because I've watched a lot of anime, and to be fair, the average level of horniness is relatively horny for anime. And there are some ones that are very, very horny. But I'm watching this, I'm like, the first 3 episodes, I'm like, yeah, it's a little horny, but, like, I mean, obviously characters are drawn with, like, proportions that were huge boobs, big butt, tiny waist. Guys are ripped. Like, that's pretty common stuff in anime, for sure. Like, One Piece is one of the most popular manga and anime of all time. Naruto, one of the most popular manga and anime of all time. Bleach, so we're hitting all of the big 3, all have women drawn with those proportions, and all the guys are ripped. So yeah, that level of horniness is fairly common. But then you hit episode 4. And episode 4 is when this gets super horny. Like, this show gets on levels of horniness that most anime I've watched have not gotten to. Now, that's not to say it's uncommon in the anime community, because there's a genre literally called harem anime, so yeah, so I'm going to say, no, not all anime is this horny, but there are anime that are hornier than this. Now, you do get some weird-ass sex scenes in this. Like, I was, like, turning down my TV. I didn't want people in the house to hear what was going on in this show occasionally, so, yeah. Second question follows up from the first question. What keeps this from being hentai? So this, I guess, is kind of subjective, but what I'm going to say is the same thing that keeps something like Game of Thrones or Spartacus or those HBO shows, Star shows that have a lot of sex scenes. It's the same thing that keeps those from being porn. It's a story-driven plot where sex doesn't take up a majority of the plot line, necessarily, because talking about sex does take up a lot of the plot line, but actually having sex does not take up a majority of screen time. So that's what I'm going to go with. So the third question, I touched on this a little bit. Is the writing always so packed with exposition? It seems like every line is someone yelling bastard or explaining what's happening during a fight. This show is particularly bad with the exposition, I will say. It's exposition's pretty common with longer anime, especially with more complicated power systems. But the good anime managed to pack it down to a couple episodes. I'll refer to Hunter x Hunter again. The exposition in Hunter x Hunter is packed down to short scenes where there's narrator dude who's specifically there to talk about exposition when the author feels like it needs to be explained what's going on. Because sometimes obviously you want to say show don't tell, but that's not always possible when translating manga or graphic novels. Like, sometimes things get lost in translation and exposition is needed to fill the gaps. This show does it extremely clunkily. Like, I agree with Ross that a lot of the dialogue is exposition. I can't even tell you how many times an episode someone says Dark Schneider. Like, it's really, really not great writing-wise. But in terms of, like, I see where exposition is necessary, especially in longer animes with, evolving battle systems and power systems that are complicated. So, like, the best example of how to do it right is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, where they talk about things like, but it flows naturally with the story. The explanation flows naturally with the story. Like, the characters are learning things at the same time as the audience, so the explanation is necessary. This, it seems like they're expositing strictly to tell the audience, and they're really holding the audience's hand when doing it. Alright, touched on this a bit too. Number 4, is the character design universal, i.e. giant tits, tiny waist, 12 packs. That's pretty common in anime. Really, the big three all had this, especially giant tits and tiny waist. So yeah, that's I'm not going to say universal, but very common. All right, number 5. Do they always do the inner thoughts thing? It's like the scene in Airplane. Jim never vomits at home. Okay, so inner thoughts, yeah, that's pretty common. The inner thoughts thing is fairly common. Again, it's kind of something where it's translating manga, like, I think this is a pretty common thing with adaptations in general. So in the manga, you can write out the person's thoughts, clearly. So when that happens, you need some way to translate that to anime. So yeah, the inner thoughts thing is pretty common. Is the fourth wall breaking a consistent thing? I'm not going to say super consistent, but there are definitely anime and manga that know what they are and can work a fourth wall break in. So, like, obviously, I made Ross watch Ghost Stories the first week that I picked for him. And there was a lot of fourth wall breaking in that because it's a comedy. So, I'm not going to say it's a consistent thing, but, like, I could think of a handful of anime that do it, sure. Are the same handful of actors used across every show? Yeah, so, especially, it depends on the animation studio, but yeah, there's definitely some mainstays in terms of voice acting. Johnny Young Bosch is the one that comes to mind. He seems to always play the angsty hero type. So, Chris Sabat always plays, like, the super strong macho guy. So, yeah, there's definitely some go-tos in the anime world for voice acting. Are all the theme songs such cock-rocking bangers? I love anime theme songs, I do. Now, are they all rock? Not necessarily, no. But are they all bangers? Oh, there's a good amount of bangers in the anime. There's a whole section of YouTube dedicated to doing rock covers to anime theme songs. So yeah, there's a lot of good anime theme songs, and I love the animation with it. I know Ross really enjoyed the second opening for Death Note when we watched that. I think he referred to that as Japanese System of a Down, which pretty good analogy. So yeah, I'm gonna go with there's a lot of good, and that is one thing with Bastard. I thought the music was awesome because, like, obviously it has metal backgrounds. I like metal, so yeah, this was a good opening. Is there always a Pokemon sidekick? There's frequently a Pokemon sidekick. So with a Pokemon sidekick, you look at in Bastard. There's a little dragon that can talk that follows around Dark Schneider. Common examples would be like Poir, Oolong in Dragon Ball. Those are some pretty early examples. Tony Chopper in One Piece plays a bigger role than just Pokemon sidekick. Like, he's a doctor and he can also fight, but I think you could fit him into that role to an extent. I'm not sure it does him justice though. Was the name the cat in Fairy Tail? So yeah, Pokemon sidekick. Is there always one? No. Is it a fairly common thing? Yeah. And the last question Ross has: what the fuck is with the cat ears temporarily appearing on character's head? So there are anime that do kind of do the furry cat ear whatever thing, but in this show, it's an artistic choice to show when a character is feeling meek or like puppyish, I guess. Like, that's the only way I could describe it. It's weird. It almost feels out of tone, and I think that's why the author did it, because the scenes are so out of tone with the rest of the show. He wanted to find a way to make them kind of funnier. So those are all of Roscoe's questions. I gave my thoughts. The fight scenes, particularly, I like the fight scene with Dark Schneider and Ninja Master Gara. But overall, it's an okay show. It's 13 episodes. They're like 25-minute episodes. Not a lot to bite off. I'm not sure I would continue watching it, but I didn't mind watching the first 13 episodes. Like, they didn't drag. Some of the episodes really dragged me into it. If you're into, like, kind of a hornier action fantasy anime, you'll probably like it. The writing's not great, but the action and there's action and entertainment to be had there, so yeah, it's fine. But overall, like, maybe a 5 out of 10 in terms of my anime scale. Nothing spectacular going on here. Alright, so that was my review of Bastard Heavy Metal Dark Fantasy. If you enjoy this content, please give us a like, subscribe to us. We're trying to build our YouTube brand. Write out comments. Let us know how wrong we are. I know Ross has been very wrong with a couple anime, so go let him know that. Alright, so I'm